If you plan to create a multimedia presentation, consider the guidance of the multimedia principles. Two important theories influence the principles: cognitive load theory and the cognitive theory of multimedia learning. It takes work to take in, filter, and digest new information and move it into long-term memory. The amount of work to accomplish these things is known as cognitive load. Cognitive load theory states that three types of load make up cognitive load. Intrinsic load is associated with the inherent level of difficulty material presents. Extraneous load is associated with wasted effort, confusion, and distraction. Germane load is associated with building connections, adding meaning, and constructing knowledge. The cognitive theory of multimedia introduced us to the idea that there are three facets to multimedia learning. First, we possess two channels for processing information: auditory and visual. Our ability to process information has limits, and the third piece to this is that we learn through filtering, organizing, and integrating new information with prior knowledge. The principles of multimedia learning grew through years of research. Use them to create presentations that minimize extraneous load and maximize students' working memory capacity. First, the Multimedia Principle tells us that combining words and graphics will do a better job of communicating information than words alone. Now let's build on that idea and layer in the Modality Principle, which states that combining audio narration and graphics will bring about better learning than visuals and printed words. Learners can more easily digest visual content while listening to complementary narration. Visuals should be meaningful. The Image Principle tells us that making a talking head presentation is not optimal, but do let your students see you from time to time. Get on camera, give examples, answer questions, or tell a story that illustrates a point you would like to make. It isn't always possible to have a meaningful visual for everything you would like to say. And speaking of everything you'd like to say, the Coherence Principle encourages us to keep extra sounds and visuals out of our presentations. If you're tempted to add extras because you believe they will add enjoyment, think again. Those extras will likely add confusion and little else. What students really enjoy is knowing what to focus on in order to learn. Keep yourself from going off on tangents. Write a script or create an outline. You don't have to read the script, but you can use it as a way to think through and organize your main points. Tying in with thinking through and organizing your main points is the segmenting principle, which states that it is best for learners to gauge for themselves when they're ready to advance. Make it easier for them to do this by breaking down your topics into smaller chunks. If you follow this advice, you'll make things easier for yourself in case you need to go back in and change a graphic or restate something that you said. The signaling principle encourages us to build in cues to better help our learners focus on the most relevant material. Examples of signaling include stressing keywords, providing outlines, and adding arrows or circles to graphics. The redundancy principle tells us that we should never double up delivery of information by using both the auditory and visual channels to explain the same thing at the exact same time. The visual channel can overload quickly if text is present on screen, describing a visual that you're describing with your voice at the same time. Including some text is just fine. Use key words, especially if the terms are technical, lengthy, or needed for future reference. The continuity principle outlines two ways to lower the potential for confusion. First, keep words that correspond to a location on an image in close proximity to that location. And secondly, show visuals at the same time you're talking about them. Don't talk about a process and then show it. Narrate processes real time. The pre-training principle states that we should familiarize learners with the names and characteristics of key system and process components ahead of time. Learning can be more effective if students can focus on the relationships between the components during a lesson because they've already become familiar with the individual components themselves. And finally, the personalization principle states that it is best to use a conversational style. Discourse processing research reveals that learners work harder to understand information when they feel as though they are in a conversation with a partner.